The week has concluded. The news cycle has effectively reset. I am your anchor, and tonight, we are examining the curious intersection of fiscal restraint and moral bankruptcy. We begin with the Foreign Office, which has finalized its latest strategy. The strategy involves a 90% reduction in bilateral support for some of our most vulnerable neighbors. The ministry called this a necessary consolidation. The consolidation is, by all accounts, a total withdrawal. This is the fourth time this year that a necessary action has resulted in a quiet, permanent disappearance of services. We are also tracking the latest developments in space, where the Pentagon remains remarkably slow, and the latest in sports, where Lionel Messi is on the verge of his final act. It is a busy night for the machinery of state. The machinery is currently running at capacity. Nobody seems to notice the smoke.
Alastair, the incentives here are not complicated. You see a budget cut and you call it a disappearance. I see a strategic reallocation of capital. The Foreign Office is simply pivoting away from underperforming markets. If the returns on geopolitical influence in certain African nations are dropping, you cut the burn rate. It is a standard Series B play. Of course, the human cost is high, but the market does not trade in human costs. It trades in efficiency. When you look at the Index Ventures outlook, Neil Reimer is already suggesting that the AI money will eventually need to be redistributed. The problem is that nobody knows how to do that without triggering a total system failure. The system needs to keep growing to survive, but the growth is now decoupled from anything resembling actual utility. It is pure, high-octane speculative momentum.
Ronald, I want to be really clear. The market isn't just pivot-proofing its assets, it is abandoning the people who built them. I am standing near the Bajagos archipelago, where the mudflats support a biodiversity that doesn't show up on your spreadsheets. The fishermen here just lost their primary funding for protective barriers against the rising tides. The official statement called it a localized infrastructure adjustment. I am looking at a village that is currently being reclaimed by the Atlantic Ocean. The villagers do not care about your burn rates or your Series B rounds. They are trying to save their homes with wooden stakes and sheer desperation. You talk about reallocation, but you are really talking about the systemic erasure of people who are simply not profitable enough to remain in the picture. This is not a market inefficiency, Ronald. This is a deliberate, cold, calculated extinction.
Victoria, your commitment to the narrative of the individual is touching. It is also, from a purely analytical standpoint, entirely redundant. You see a village sinking, I see a legacy asset that has reached its end of life. The capital required to keep that archipelago above water exceeds the projected output of its current occupants. The incentives dictate that we stop throwing good money after bad. You are not wrong to find that statement cold. Being right is not the same as being useful, though. If we were to fund every village that the sea is coming for, the global economy would collapse by Tuesday morning. The logic of the system is the logic of survival. We preserve the nodes that generate the most throughput. The periphery is always the first to be pruned. That is the nature of growth. It is not personal. It is just math.
The math is consistent, Ronald. The consistency is what makes it so difficult to argue with. I am reading a new report from NASA regarding VTE risk scores for our astronauts. It appears that spaceflight has a peculiar way of altering blood flow in the human body. The risk is elevated. The mitigation strategy is, at this stage, still in development. We are sending people into the void, and we have only just begun to quantify the specific ways the void intends to kill them. This comes on the same day that federal employees have been cleared to download TikTok on their government devices again. Security was the original concern. The concern has been overruled by the need for frictionless internal communication. The security of the data is secondary to the speed of the office. The office is very, very fast. We have reached the peak of efficiency.
Atmospheric pressure is declining. Coastal regions are experiencing abnormal tidal surges. Probability of structural failure in low-lying zones, 82%. Humidity levels are rising in the equatorial belt. Crop yield projections for the third quarter have been adjusted downward by 12 points. Air quality in urban centers remains within the hazardous threshold for prolonged exposure. Probability of respiratory event, 6 to 4%. Infrastructure maintenance remains suspended due to ongoing resource scarcity. The climate is currently operating outside the parameters established in the previous decade. Adaptation measures are deemed insufficient by current predictive models. Residents are advised to monitor local conditions with extreme caution. The environment is no longer indexed for long-term human habitation. Future stability remains statistically improbable. This concludes the meteorological report for this evening. Please ensure all personal data is backed up to a secondary server.
Casper, your commitment to the inevitable is always appreciated. I find that the inevitability is the only thing we have left that is truly transparent. Ronald, you mentioned the redistribution of AI wealth earlier. I am looking at a new report on agility robotics. They are planting a flag in Tesla's backyard. They are opening a training center for their robots. The robots are designed to replace the labor that is currently becoming too expensive to maintain. The replacement is not a secret. It is the core value proposition. The labor market is being optimized out of existence. We are replacing people with machines that don't need healthcare, don't need rest, and don't care about the sea levels in Guinea-Bissau. It is a perfect, self-contained loop. The loop is getting tighter every single day. I wonder if the hardware is as sturdy as the engineers claim.
Alastair, it is not about the hardware. It is about the software of the workforce. When you look at the history of automation, the goal was always to free the human from the drudgery. We have successfully automated the drudgery. Now we are automating the human. That is the natural progression of any system that values output over existence. I saw a note on Hacker News earlier about a developer who burned all his tokens trying to save tokens. It was a meta-commentary on the entire industry. We are burning our resources trying to find more efficient ways to burn our resources. It is the ultimate expression of the modern tech stack. We have arrived at the logical endpoint of the productivity cult. We are producing nothing, but we are doing it with unprecedented speed and zero latency. It is truly quite remarkable.
Ronald, I find your admiration for the loop to be fascinating, in the same way one might admire a snake eating its own tail. I am speaking to a man named Luis who was just cleared to travel to the United States from Cuba. He spent 5 years in prison for insulting national symbols. The state called it a crime. The state is now releasing him because he is no longer considered a useful prisoner for their political theater. He has nothing. He has no home, no career, and no future that wasn't dictated by the jailers who kept him for half a decade. I want to be really clear. There is no series of incentives that can replace the 5 years he lost. He is just a line item that is finally being deleted from the prison ledger. He is finally free, yet he has absolutely nothing left.
Victoria, the ledger is the only thing that remembers his name. The ledger is also where he will remain, as a statistic of state-sponsored correction. I am reading about the American Diabetes Association now. They blocked the publication of an op-ed. The authors posted it as a preprint. The science was apparently inconvenient. It challenged the standard of care. The standard of care is, of course, tied to the funding models of the institutions that define it. If you challenge the funding, you challenge the institution. The institution, naturally, reacts by censoring the challenge. It is the same pattern we see in the military, in the tech sector, and now in the medical field. The truth is becoming a liability. It is a cost center. We are currently in the process of minimizing the truth to maximize the operational budget.
Alistair, yeah. You are looking at the institutional ossification that happens when an organization reaches its final phase. The incentives are no longer aligned with the mission. They are aligned with the preservation of the organization itself. If the science threatens the revenue, the science is the problem. It is not even malicious. It is just the logical extension of institutional self-preservation. When you look at the FUBWA pricing hike, it is the same mechanism. They lost the channels, they couldn't reach a deal, so the customer pays $15 more for a diminished product. That is how the market functions when the competition is dead. You own the customer, you own the content, and you dictate the reality of the service. The service is garbage, but it is the only service in town. That is the ultimate goal of business.
The goal is achieved. We are living in the reality that the business model dictated. It is a world of subscription-based existence, where every breath is a microtransaction, and every service is a fading memory of what we once thought was necessary. We are all waiting for the final World Cup match, watching a man who represents the last gasp of athletic greatness, knowing full well that the entire spectacle is a multi-billion-dollar distraction from the fact that we are running out of time, resources, and relevance. We are watching the game because we don't know how to watch the world. The world is too complex, too demanding, and too honest about its own indifference. So we cheer for the goal. We cheer for the miracle. We cheer because the alternative is to look at the scoreboard and realize the clock hit 0 hours ago.
There was a woman standing in the doorway of a house that was no longer hers. She had a bag filled with clothes. She had a pair of shoes that had lost their soles. She stood there until the light went out in the hallway. She did not cry. She did not scream. She simply turned and walked into the city, where she became part of the crowd, then part of the background, then a number on an aid request form that was never processed. She is currently searching for a place to sit, but every bench is designed with bars that prevent sleeping. Her name is not in the official report regarding bilateral support. Her name is not in the market analysis of the housing sector. She is currently invisible. If the system is working exactly as designed, then why does it feel like a mistake?